For this opportunity to present some of my things. First I'd like to say many thanks from the depth of my heart to our generous host, to Johan, to beautiful Romania. Well, start with my apologies for showing no slides. The last several weeks before my visit here, I was trying to complete my presentation, but there were always beautiful people who wanted to help. Well, first I have two little daughters, and they always, every 5 minutes when I was doing my presentation, they were coming and say, Papa, Papa, I want to help you. Yes, and then there were some colleagues from my university who phoned me every half an hour and asked me to do some urgent work and say, well, we definitely help you to prepare your presentation. So I love my daughters, and that is truth. And I love my work, and that is also truth. Love brings us freedom. So this was the main part of my report. The other one is boring, but let's go. So we start with the so-called formula of human. Often, when we touch upon the question of the essential characterization of human, the category of conscious is proposed as a solution. Another answer is the idea of rationality included in the very name of human species, Homo sapiens. However, is conscious a specifically human trait? In a certain sense, conscious is the ability to be aware of objects of the habitat and of some connections that exist in it, and relating oneself to the reality of the surrounding world. Resist the spontaneity of our existence, in the words of Max Scheler. But in this sense, conscious is inherent in many other living things. If we separate man from other animals because of his rationality, as Aristotle, who called man as animal rationale, did, then let us ask ourselves, after Ernst Cassirer, yes, let's say rationality is a feature inherent exclusively in man, but is the man himself exclusively rational? Do we sometimes reason, and even more often than we are ready to admit, completely illogically? Do we not make decisions and do not commit acts despite all the rational evidence? In his thinking, however, a human being has the ability to think about how he thinks, and in his speech, to speak about how he speaks. That is, to take his own thinking and speech acts as a subject of reflection and speculation. Therefore, we can assert this or that identity, say I am this or we are that, by due to the dynamism of the symbolic substrate of our language, we cannot only state our own identity, but also question it. Is this really me? Are we really that? And reassert it in a new way. Thus we come to the perspective of the self-conscious. self-consciousness, which seems to be the distinguishing characteristic of human. Self-consciousness implies looking at oneself, but at the same time it is necessarily means the detachment from oneself, going beyond the boundaries of oneself as the subject of our knowledge. It is how Helmut Plessner saw the specifics of human eccentricity, the ineradicable distancing of the center of our positionality from itself. What is self-knowledge? First of all, it is an activity aimed at defining oneself, that is, in finding one's own limits. Defining oneself, we draw a line within which we actually are, and beyond which is what we are not. But what allows us to delineate this magic circle that protects us from any demons who otherwise would tear us to pieces, disambiguate our identity? And why does this circle sometimes appear so different for different people and cultures? The fact is that in delineating ourselves, our individual atomic self, which cannot be divided no more, we start from our ideas about something that surpasses us many times, or even infinitely. Sometimes something superior, which makes us just that and not any other thing. Thus we could conclude that we highlight our individual limits through correlation with the super-individual, and that we find ourselves in comparison with our super-individual. However, it would be more correct to say, as I believe, that we are not just this individual, but our very correlation between the individual and the super-individual. This correlation of the individual and the super-individual can have different forms of expression. However, we can speak about certain meta forms, archetypes, which lie at the basis of various correlations that form our I and our we, correlations that often are quite dissimilar at a phenomenal level, but related in their essence. Such metaforms are paradigmatic and make it possible to combine various anthropologies on the principle of not external similarities or even historical continuity, but internal relatedness, not necessarily genetic, but semantic one. Thus, we can speak about the main anthropological paradigms and try to highlight their coordinate systems. At the same time, we should note the ideally typical nature of paradigms. They are presented to us as ideal models and structure of speculations by which a person defines himself, but not as concrete speculation as such. However, concrete speculation tends to these models and is carried out within their boundaries and according to their laws. And it is according to the degree of compliance of a speculation with these boundaries and laws we can attribute the speculation to one or another anthropological paradigms. So now we come to the question of super-individual limits of the main anthropological paradigms. Based on the understanding on man's super-individual limit and their correlation, the correlation between man and his super-individual limit, we can identify three main anthropological paradigms, as I believe, which are mytho-metaphysical, physically natural, and sociocentric. In the first case, the cosmos, or the metaphysical absolute with which man correlates by means of the spirit, seems to be the super-individual limit. In the second paradigm, physically natural, it is nature, freed from its mythological or idealistic understandings, or maybe deprived of them. So it is nature with which a person correlates, first of all, thanks to his body, and in accordance with the possibilities that this body gives us and within the limits it puts. And finally, in the third paradigm, the super-individual limit is thought to be the social, and the key intermediary between the individual and the super-individual here is the meaning, which is historical, sociogenic, and culturally conditioned. So let's start with the first paradigm. The metaphysical anthropological paradigm has its roots in the deepest anciency, almost in the very dawn of humanity. Can we also call this paradigm religious? Yes and no. No, with, as far as I believe, no, with a sociological understanding of religion. First of all, as a social institution with its culture, ritual component, sacred canons, and distinct class of people attached to special knowledge and performing a mediating function between man and the highest reality, etc. The myth may be considered as a system of views upon the world built on sensual images, while the metaphysical system is based on theoretical concept. Religion can conclude both myth and metaphysics, doctrine, in the form of doctrine. However, we are well aware of another concept of religion, where it is fundamentally distinguished from the myth and even contrasted with it. And we will find supporters of this approach among the clergy theologians and among scientific theorists. However, our answer will be positive. Answer to the question, can we call the first paradigm religion? Our answer will be positive if we comply to a broad understanding of religion, according to which religious experience of the sacred, or numinous experience using Rudolf Otto's concept, can also be available to a person who is outside the body of a certain institutionalized religion. There cannot be religion of a single person, but the religiosity of an individual is possible. Another question is how genuine it may seem from the point of view of a particular religion. Does this ability to religiosity before or outside religion dwell in the very nature of human being, in the longing for in the longing of a finite being for the being infinite, or in some kind of premonition, insight? Is the myth just one of the forms of the description of reality, or is it, as for example, what Levi-Strauss believed, it is a level of language that determines the thinking of the subject? In the latter case, the myth as a language will underlie the metaphysical reasoning and metaphysical doctrine. We can also imagine the opposite picture, according to which metaphysical doctrine reveals itself to the highest metaphysical doctrine reveals So I made a mistake. So the opposite idea that in metaphysical doctrine, the highest metaphysical truth reveals itself. So as it, for example, René Guénon proposed. And this metaphysical truth is divine, and it reveals itself through the intellectual intuition, and the myth turns out here to be a more external level of its manifestation, where the intellect gives way to other cognitive abilities of man. Cosmos, as a super-individual limit, as a rule, is inherent in the polytheistic worldview, which by representatives of monotheistic religions addressing the metaphysical absolute is also called pagan. Nevertheless, when comparing developed models of polytheism which, for example, Jan Assmann defines as complex polytheism, and where various divine instances represent different hypostases of the divine as such, with, say, Christian monotheism, with its cult of not only Trinity but also the Virgin Mary, with its institution of patron saints and so on, in spite of doctrinal differences, we maybe, with some necessary proviso, can admit a certain structural and functional similarities between them. Thus, the distinction between the cosmos and the metaphysical absolute, as well as two very different views of the world, and the two different ways of relating oneself with a supra-individual limit, emphasize two paradigms instead of one. This argument, of course, has a sense. However, in spite of all differences, these two models are united by the conviction in the presence and primacy of a certain reality, if visible, then only in its manifestations, which lies at the basis of both physical and social order. And this fact radically distinguishes these models from the second and the third paradigm, from the physical and natural paradigm and sociocentric paradigm. The variety of actual anthropologies that seem to be included in the first paradigm raises another question. Can the category of spirit, spiritual, be considered as a general concept encompassing the means by which the individual being in the mytho-metaphysical paradigm is linked to the supra-individual? The question is ambiguous. Did not the immersion of an archaic man in the world around him dissolve him in the elementary natural, even if revealed by means of mythological images that personified one or another of its manifestations? If so, then when in this elementary nature is a place for the spirit? In the context of the Abrahamic creationist models, material nature appears as the creation of the divine principle, and human life is centered around its connection with the universal metaphysical source, which is possible due to the fact that the person, the man, is not only the body and the dimensions of mental and social processes associated with his physical existence, but also the bearer of spiritual components, including those unconditioned by the external circumstances of his existence. The nature with which the non-Abrahamic man of the first paradigm, who is, according to Mircea Eliade, no less than the man of the monotheistic creationist religions, belong to the type of Homo religiosus, and whose existence is open to the cosmos, correlates himself, the nature with which this man correlates himself is not something natural in the modern sense, but on the contrary, always in all its manifestations, living, animated, existing in the tact with the timeless logic of the spiritual order. However, it should be noted that for the person in question, this is the natural order of things. So we can say that it is natural for this nature to be supernatural. How many minutes do we have left? 5 minutes. So, okay, I'll do some cuts. It is not without reason that the state of openness to the world itself is conceived not as given from birth, but as what should be achieved through training, initiation, the second birth, which according to the initiatory model is presented as a spiritual birth that introduces the subject to the world's logos, giving a person his real form as a human microcosm, and making possible his meaningful inclusion in the rhymes and logic of the macrocosm. The essential boundaries and main guidelines of the second anthropological paradigms. Well, I guess because I don't want to exceed my time limit, I will not go into details into the second and the third paradigms, physical and natural paradigms. It is how we see the man and the reality from the point of view of natural sciences generally. Sociocentric paradigm is a paradigm that can be described by constructivist theories generally, when everything is sociogenic and it is even nature that can be changed by sociogenic factors. So I'm not going into details into these paradigms. I could also just mention that in these three paradigms we differently see the limitlessness of human being. Because in the first paradigm, we can have a hope or can possibly achieve the infinity of our existence, the infinity of our being. Because we, according to some teachings and religions, we can, it is possible for human being, for the finite being, to come closer, and even in some religions, in some metaphysical theories, dissolve or join the absolute. The second paradigm, the natural paradigm, proposes that our super-individual limit, nature, and nature is limitless, but we can obtain, we can have only potential limitlessness in this paradigm, because we have different ways of how we can evolve from this nature. And for example, Giordano Bruno, he saw the source of optimism in the infinity of the universe, or the optimism for endless development of man. But still, it is only potential for any possible, for any particular man. And finally, when we speak about the sociocentric paradigm, we can suppose that our infiniteness or limitlessness here is not actually potential, but purely potential, because society always has its limits. According to constructivist ideas, the society can be reconstructed, but even if we speak about some radical changes, it is the change from some finite condition to another finite condition. And the man in this or that society always also has some sort of different ways how to organize his life, the project of his life. They depend on the openness of the society, on some certain conditions in this society, and some other facts. But still, this is only potential limitlessness, and whatever we choose, we're also choosing this. We cut off some other options. So. 2 more minutes and I'm done. Thank you. I also suppose that in all of these paradigms we can distinguish several dispositions that are very important for us in our anthropological knowledge. So I just named them, and I guess everybody could elaborate how these dispositions are proposed in different paradigms. What are the main anthropological dispositions, as I believe? They are dispositions or relation man-nature, and it is differently viewed through these paradigms. Man-others or man-people, man-time, including man-history, and differently opinions on this subject in different paradigms. Man spirit, or man the ideal, in some cases man the absolute, and man body, and closely connected with this disposition man death. So in all of these, all of these dispositions, they are viewed by the teachers and in all three of these paradigms differently, but I believe that generally inside of the paradigms, the answers to these dispositions, the explanation of these dispositions, they are much more similar than with the explanation that another paradigm gives us. And finalizing, just a few words about the coexistence of different paradigms, and one more thing about the post-truth world and its problems. So we have to admit that many authors cannot be clearly attributed to one or another paradigm, because in some arguments they can be closer, for example, to a physically natural paradigm, while in other arguments to a sociocentric one. This is not a problem for us, because in this study we are not concerned with the personalities themselves, but with the ideas that these authors have expressed. It is important to emphasize that the approval of a new paradigm means, first of all, its dominance, but not a complete replacement of the preceding paradigm. Centuries after the adoption of Christianity by Constantine and the banning of pagan cults by Theodosius, the Christianized territories preserve the pagan world perception as a rule in various forms of hidden polytheism. According to Mircea Eliade, once again, and a number of other authors, for example, very distant from the canonical Christian attitude to nature and the cosmos as something living and full of spirit, or not familiar to present-day people, linear but cyclic experience of time was very typical to the Eastern European peasant of the first half of the 20th century. Similarly, in spite of the dominance of the second anthropological paradigm, scientifically based views in the minds of a significant number of people are combined, often in an eclectic and unreflected manner, with combined with those of other beliefs rooted in metaphysical paradigms. So two more paradigms. Thus, it can be claimed that the first paradigm does not disappear completely, does not depart in the past, but ceases to be a legitimate basis for the dominant epistemological, sociological, and first of all, anthropological discourses. On the one hand, it is possible to talk about the possibility of choosing a paradigm, the question about freedom, which a person of the past was deprived of. But on the other hand, one cannot avoid the question of how free a person really is in this choice. As a result, we find ourselves in an anthropological situation characterized by numerous contradictions associated, for example, with the difficulties caused by the legacy of the first metaphysical paradigm while trying to consistently follow the principles of the second or third paradigm. The efforts of the third sociocentric paradigm aimed at overcoming dependence on the principles of the physical and natural paradigm cannot always be crowned with success. And finally, we should attribute the question of the man's possibility of full and fruitful incorporation into the models of the first paradigm in the situation of dominance of the second and third paradigms to the same problematic and sometimes very painful points. The search for answers that could contribute to the resolution of these difficulties and contradictions cannot be accomplished by any anthropology in a way that would satisfy the other ones, since any of them proceeds from the paradigm to which it belongs. A prerequisite for such a search is to reach a certain meta-paradigmal level. Is this condition possible? As for me, the question is over. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your philosophical inquiry. Please, question and answer session. Please,
Yeah, Philipp, thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned for a few times about Mircea Eliade, the famous Romanian historian in religions. And you mentioned about Homo religiosus. Yes. In your opinion, if we will talk about the human person, of the human, or the human in our days, we can speak about Homo scientificus or something like that.
Thank you for your question. The thing is, as far as I believe, that science, the dominance of science, and the real results, the real practical results it gives us, it makes a science also, the basis for some sort of contemporary mentality. The problem is that most of the people, unfortunately for the scientific paradigm, most of the people, as I understand, as I believe, they follow the label of scientifically proved. They follow the ideas or some statements that have that as they believe they are proved scientifically. But generally, if it is not a specialist in the same scientific field, a person cannot prove or disprove this scientific explanation or statement and accepts it in some way, in a similar way when a religious person accepts the thing that, for example, a priest tells him. So, yes, the scientific justification, the scientific understanding of man, process of cognition, the reality, it dominates in contemporary mentality. But at the same time, when we try to analyze how a person lives in this information field, I guess we see lots of examples that with the lack of rationalization, speculation, intellectual effort, and something like this. As for Mircea Eliade, I guess it's one of my most favorite. I'm not saying because he's Romanian.
Me too, yes.
Yes, one of my most favorite theories in the history of religion, and I guess that his methodology can be successfully applied to the history of religion in a broad sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your question.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Any question?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And it reminded me of the Philipp Lonergan, who is a Jesuit, and his theory of development of human mind. So development from mythological approach and then scientific approach and then social. So it reminded me that concept. But I wonder, when we speak now about freedom, do you think that we are now about developing a new paradigm of human that would include being responsible? Actually, that is what Bernard Lonergan does. So do you think that we are about creating something new? Because all paradigms that you have mentioned, they imply there exists certain truths in mythology. also is a myth. There is the existence and worldview and scientific paradigm there is truth, and now living in a post-truth society, where we are politically. Is that
Thank you for your question. We try to answer your question in the following ways. In any paradigm, in any society, in any epoch, there is a place for irresponsibility. And in any period of time, there is a place for responsibility. In this case, we can speak about different, qualitatively different understanding of freedom. And during our previous discussion yesterday, we already came to this question: freedom to do whatever we like, or freedom to do what is right. Yes, but still, if we return to the question of responsibility, according to the first paradigm, for example, we can speak about the responsibility before the God. Yes, and we can be guilt. We can have guilt. We have sinned or not. We could sin or not. In the second paradigm, when we speak nothing about God or metaphysical reality, still there are lots of places for responsibility. For example, from the existential model, when in Jean-Paul Sartre's way, we cannot speak about guilty even, but we can speak about existential responsibility, because a person is absolutely free. He has absolute freedom of choice at any moment, but this freedom of choice, this absolute freedom of choice, also means the absolute responsibility. So we are responsible not only for what we do or not, or for what we say or not, but also for what people around us do or not, because we can influence them, or we can refrain from telling something to them. And even we are responsible for something that is taking place somewhere on the other part of the world, the same thing, I guess, with the post-truth world, with the third paradigm, because there is no universal idea of the truth here, and everything is in constant change. But it also, as far as I understand it, accelerate the exchange between doing something and taking a response. So we not only have a responsibility in some prolonged perspective, but we are responsible for everything that happens to us every now and then. If we do not see if we do not see many responsible people nowadays, then in the post-truth world, well, then I repeat that any period of time has the place for irresponsibility, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have no time for questions. Thank you very much, Professor.